Hello, my name's Jan Wood. Welcome to today's episode of Coffee Break. And today I'm here at Ballast Point Park. It's only been open since the 11th of July 2009 and it's absolutely glorious. So let's go and have a look at some footage I took on opening day.
For a long time to come. We're planting a variety of trees here. There are banksias, there are a range of grasses, understories, little shrubs. So what we want to do here is to have a really beautiful park with a range of plants that really enhance this really beautiful site in Balmain.
My name's Erin and I'm the Regional Manager of the Sydney office for Conservation Volunteers and been working there for a few years. Today we're just helping the community to plant trees in their local area and I guess making it safe and fun for people to participate. Conservation Volunteers started in 1982 down in Victoria and since then has grown to be a nationwide organisation. We've got 24 offices around the country and we do a whole range of things, mainly environmental conservation work but also heritage conservation as well. And we've also just moved into New Zealand as well.
I don't think because
She has, yeah.
That's not our. Okay.
That's not your group.
Different mummy.
Oh, different mummy.
It is our group.
So if anyone would like to be a conservation
that one's too big.
volunteer,
one of the best things if they have internet access is to probably just have a look on our website. Out of each of our offices all around the country we run projects pretty much every day of the year. And we also have some good residential projects as well, so where people go away for 4 nights and 5 days. And it's a really good way to see Australia and you go to lots of places that you wouldn't usually be able to access and get to contribute to, I suppose, the betterment of the environment there. So yes, you can call up any office in Australia as well and someone will help you out and tell you what's going on. Just grab a pair of gloves. Are you going to plant as well?
Okay.
Did you put your name on there too, please?
You
want to plant?
It's all right, I will plant.
What do we have to do?
You might need to come back in about 10 or 15 minutes if that's okay, but you can have a quick read of this if if you don't have any pre-existing medical conditions, you'd be right to sign this form here. Otherwise, we need to find out a bit more info.
Good job, Chris.
Oh,
Good job.
What kind of pre-existing
sort of like back injuries, any allergies that we need to be aware of, ankle injuries, knee, sort of anything you think that might impact your ability to plan a trip. It looks like a bodybuilder.
Thank you very much. There's a stack just there.
Oh yeah, just here.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. That was fun.
Yeah, good. Okay, can I grab the...
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's a pressure gauge from an old boiler, I think. Yeah. But there's also a number plate from the last vehicle around here. The number plate from the last truck that was in there. It's just rubbish from somewhere else, but it's got a lot of local artefacts in there. Good.
And today I'm here at Ballast Point Park, and it's absolutely wonderful. It's the work of the Sydney Harbour Foreshores Authority, and the design and the artwork and the concept behind it is just wonderful. And I'm very fortunate to have the designer of the park here today. So I'd like to introduce you to Phil.
I'm Phillip Coxall from McGregor Coxall with the landscape architects for the project, and I'd like to tell you a little bit about the park just so you might understand what we tried to do here. The history of this particular site is really quite fascinating. Originally it was used for ballast. Sandstone ballast was quarried from the sandstone cliffs around here to put on the boats that used to come here and return empty. So they needed something to weigh those boats. Life of the park, actually, there was a Menivia, a building, a marine villa that was built by a man called Thomas Perkins, who was a draper. And he built a beautiful house sitting up on the headland looking out over the harbour. But that didn't last too long, and in the 1930s, Caltex bought the site and they turned it into a storage area for fuel. So the site had a checkered history when ultimately Caltex had decamped and decided that they would move out of the site, and SHF A, or the government, acquired the land. And so when we came on board, the idea was, well, how do we respond to this site history? How do we respond in a way that tells a story about the park? And the main focus was the idea that this had been kind of an abused landscape over many periods of time, and so when we rebuilt this into a parkland, we didn't want to destroy other landscapes in the rebuilding of this landscape.
Fascinating things about this site is that we didn't actually know this building was here originally. We were excavating, and in the excavation process we started uncovering these sandstone pieces. We then realised there must be something here, so we called in the archaeologists, and they came in and started digging out and revealing there was an old building here. They then went back and checked the records and found that there used to be a house here. And so through the records we then started establishing where the rest of the building would be. And whilst we identified where it was, we couldn't find it. And then probably about 80% into the construction stage, we found the rest of the building, which is this sandstone base over here. And that we found on the day we were pouring the concrete, because we were excavating out to pour it, and then we realised there it was. So we actually changed the design again to incorporate that, and then all these objects that you see in the wall here are things that we found on the site when we excavated. And I just think that's so beautiful that we can display those in a park and tell the history about the site.
Kath, can you tell us a little bit about Minerva, please?
Well, it really starts way back in the 1800s, and that was when Dr. William Balmain received a land grant, and this area of our wonderful park today is part of that area. Now, the estate changed hands a couple of times until 1852, when Thomas Perkins, a merchant of Sydney town, purchased the entire estate. nothing still happened for some years. It actually took 12 years before he built his lovely Minevia. And it's spelt in those days M-I-N-E-V-I-A. It was a huge 2-storey sandstone villa. It also had wonderful entryways made of all the locally quarried sandstone. The Perkin family lived here for about 20 years. Then the next people in residence were the Pearce, George Pearce, and his family lived here for about 10. Oh, this is the photo of the painting, and it was the artist was Frederick Flockton, painted in 1890. So that would have been when the Pearce family were in residence. It shows, of course, its artist's license in the distance with the church towers. That's how we were able to really identify it. It's a beautiful house. This photo is quite an enlargement, really, taken from the North Shore, but you can see how the size of it. It was quite an enormous 2-storey residence. Now this brings us up to about just after the 1900s. Then the different phase of Minevia changed. It was decided to have it opened as a guest house and mainly for gentlemen. And the name changed somewhat in the spelling to M-E-N-E-V-I-A, which is known today as Minevia. Now at the end of its life it was very run down, and it was decided to sell off Minevia and the huge estate. And eventually Texco Oil came, and of course, as we know, Caltex. But it's interesting to note that when the residents of Balmain realised the estate here was going to be sold off, they petitioned the Balmain Council to try and save the area for open space, because just a year before that time, over at Ball's Head, which is just across the way here, that land at Ball's Head was saved by the Lang government and saved for public open space. But we had to wait 90 years, and it's a beautiful area.
So we said we're not going to go out and get other sandstone and bring it back. We're going to try and find as much recycled material as we can find around the Sydney region and turn it into the new ballast of recycled material for the park. And so if you walk around the park, you'll see one of the most dominant elements are these walls here. And the idea came from the sense that we could break down the old buildings that were here, the bricks, the concrete roads, etc., and rework it in a way that it turned into a building material that rebuilt the park. Now, we didn't have the material enough for the whole park, so a lot of this was sourced from tips around Sydney. So recycled building material brought in. If you look around these walls, you'll see them at 3 levels. One, you'll see them as a textured, coloured material that sits on the sandstone, and they have a lovely richness about them. The next layer, you walk in, you see them as rubbish, broken rubbish, and I love the fact that people perceive this as what they saw as something beautiful is now revealed as broken rubbish. And so the idea of how we see things, can things be seen in another light? And then the third layer is when you get closer, you'll actually see beautiful little pieces of broken tiles. There's even sports trophies, mementos of past lives that are cast in through all the walls. You can actually spend days looking at these walls at that next layer, and I really love that. All the soil is recycled soil. The mulch is recycled pallets that have been broken up. The seat belts, the straps that are actually making up the building shade canopy, if you walk around you'll see these orange structures, 3 of them around the site. They're actually made from the idea of recycled seatbelt straps. That is, seatbelt straps that have failed the safety test. And the idea of the orange colour is a reflection of the Balmain tigers, so the tiger stripes. And so there's this storyline being told right the way throughout the process. And it's been a focus of everything that we've done around here is to tell the story about the past site. So that's why we have a lot of the old heritage walls that have been kept, bricks incorporated with new. So it's telling this old new story, but it's trying to take a step forward. All the water from the site that comes off the parklands is filtered and cleaned in wetlands, and then filtered and cleaned in natural systems before it's discharged into the harbour. Prior to us taking possession of the site, it was all cast straight into the harbour. So another positive contribution. And I think if you walk around, you'll see that the handrails and the detailing of the park is such a high quality. The focus here is to talk about Balmain. Balmain has moved from a rather, you have to be careful how you say this, but a robust park, a robust area, from a very working class suburb to a more dignified kind of environment where people that are moving in now are more art-based and those kind of the workforces. And the idea is that this detail reflects that change in Balmain. So whilst it is a balustrade or a handrail or whatever, it's done in such an elegant, beautiful way that it talks about this new changing, this new blossoming of Balmain from a robustness to a sense and appreciation of beauty and those finer things. And overall, I think it's been one of those most joyous places to work on. You know, a sheer privilege to work on a site of this kind of character, this nature, this significance, and hopefully everybody who comes here enjoys it for that.
How did you do it? Did you draw the initial plans?
We actually worked off a master plan that had been developed by SHF A, which they did in conjunction with the community and another landscape architectural practice. So they laid out the basic framework for the park, where basic arrangements, how things would happen. And then we get brought on board to do the detailed design. So once Caltex actually left the site, this was the first time we actually got access to the site so we could see what we had to work with. So then everything has to be shaped and organised according to you know, how the landscape was that we found, which is really quite a lot of work to get that.
I'll take you inside. Take you into the space where you can explore and experience. So it's filled, the places has many apertures, and so the apertures are allowing you to actually frame space, and so it frames the water. There's a stepping, so you step over the edge, so it's a very uncomfortable feeling, but quite exciting, especially for kids. Kids absolutely love this. And then there's the framing of the views out. So we've got the classic view of the Harbour Bridge, and a variety of frames, and they're also placed at various levels so that different viewpoints can be picked up from different people. And then you have the frame of the sky, which is gives you a sense of time. So the sun working as a sundial.
Can I just say one thing?
Yes.
It's absolutely fabulous.
It's one of those works where it's been a really extraordinary experience working on it, and I mean, it's a rare experience. I don't normally make big structures like this. That's not really the style of work that I'm interested in putting out, but this space just cried out for something like this. And also, I must say, working with the team of the architect, engineer, construction people it was an amazing experience. They were wonderful. And also working with Phil and the team down here. It was great. Been a great experience. And now having it out, it's wonderful watching people use it. The work, originally we were invited to place the work, locate the work in the greenery, of the park, in this park over here. And the idea ended up being, for me, more significant to locate it on the edge where there's a slight sense of danger, and the work promotes an idea of vertigo, and that there's a fall in the work, and this enormous piece of concrete is just teetering. What I was working with was the idea that if ballast was taken from here, that the ballast was being exported out, and so this exchange between human and material.
I'd like to thank you very much. I'm a new resident of Balmain and it's sensational.
Fantastic.
It's really
That's so
one of the
sweet
most
of you.
beautiful places I've been, and I've travelled the world, and I think this is spectacular.
I really appreciate you saying it. It means a lot of effort from
Brilliant.
the
This has blown me
residents.
away. and the reflection on the history and us being able to realise
And
how
you
lucky we are to have these
people,
people.
community.
Thanks for that, that's really sweet, because a lot of people put a lot of effort into it, and it's great to get that feedback, because I tell you, you get a lot of negative feedback when it's not what they want, and you hear those voices very
Well, I
often.
stop the dog catchers and all sorts of people and thank them, and they say, oh no, it's the Sydney foreshore that did it finally, but they have to work in tandem, and it's really
Yeah, well, they did a great
superb
job, I think.
effort.
You know, they
And
were
thank you to
they were
you
really
for
great
being
for doing it.
persistent.
Yeah.
Actually, here we have the director of Sydney Foreshore as if on cue.
Well, thank you.
Vitality.
I was just
This
saying
is a bit
enjoying it.
special. I've never been here before.
There you go.
Well, you get everybody all in one go.
Wow.
Oh, it's pretty new. To have this history, it's just great, and to keep it and not get rid of things like this. It's brilliant.
Yes, we thought it was important.
Oh, very important.
And you know, I had a lady come up to me the other day who was just over there near the barbecue. She was just recently back, like yourself, from America, but from New York, and she was saying the same thing. You know, they don't have the new. You know, they've got the old and they're hanging on to it, but not the new enough. You know.
This is
Bringing it together.
You're a
yeah.
brilliant designer. Thank you.
That's lovely. Thanks a lot. Ed.
Thanks.
See ya. Because I'm fascinated. When was the tip point?
Well, really when Keating came on board, he
So you do think it was Paul
oh
coming
yes,
on?
we were edging that way, but could we hold on long enough, you know?
Yeah.
Yes, we were knocked down so
And
many
how
times.
did you get access to Paul? Did you call him up? Did you?
No,
did somebody know
nothing
him?
to do with our lot, although I think some of them do have, you know, some push there.
Yeah.
Yeah, they have good connections, yes. But I really think if they came to the site, they could see what we were about.
Yeah.
We kept saying it's the entryway to the harbour, up
absolutely.
harbour with Ball's Head. Why have we got to have high-rise here? You know, can't we have a bit of green, please? Yeah. So eventually...
I'm really glad I met you, because...
I'm really glad I met you.
No, but I was walking around on opening day thinking to myself, it only can be here because people stand up and say, listen, we want to try and achieve something,
Yeah,
you know?
yes.
And it's to
For
their credit.
everyone.
There's not a lot of understanding about how these things actually get through to the end point. And it kind of goes through a process. It goes from your incredible work through to people like Schiffer, I think, and Di,
Definitely,
who
yes.
then take this on board.
That's right.
Can you imagine the
Very.
negotiations of navigating this through
Oh,
governance
huge.
to
Yes,
get
we
this
appreciate
actually
it.
built?
Yes.
I think it's an incredible achievement, you know.
To what
Sure, look, I
was-
can design because I design, that's very easy, but it takes a lot of skill
That's
and
right.
ability to drive this through, and I think it's a lot of Schiffer's
Well, it's a
credit.
big tick.
It really is. I'm very
Huge
impressed with
tick.
them, and working with them has been
Yeah,
absolutely
yes.
fantastic.
Have a lot of responsibility.
Ah,
don't
so
they,
this
Schiffer?
is incredible land that we
Huge,
own on the
everywhere,
foreshore.
yes. Now that's the next one, isn't it? The great big one, White Bay, and further on. Yeah.
But I've got to say, people I'm talking to are amazed at how you came up with the design.
Yeah.
You know, when they look at the pictures of how
Yeah,
it was
how
at
it
the
was.
tank farm,
Yes.
to be able to envisage turning
Yeah.
that into this.
Yeah.
We always wanted the big tank, part of the big tank, to be brought back, but it's quite obvious as you have worked out. Of course, it would be a bit dangerous, wouldn't it? This is far better to give the idea
think
of the
this is
big
quite
tank.
But it's also,
So
I think, it's
purposely.
talking a little bit about the new future of the park. With
Mm.
unfortunately, we don't have the wind today, but Di, I have
I haven't seen
been
them
here.
working
They
yet.
actually
Work?
they work in a nor'wester and they
Ah.
work with a bit more breeze.
Yes.
But the whole idea of
Mm.
this is a new future for
That's
the park.
right, shows.
From
yeah.
fossil fuel to renewable energy, and I think that's a lovely little take on this tank's role.
That's right.
Because it's the dominant position here, looking out over Sydney Harbour.
Indeed.
It almost says this is the change about how we think about our landscape and our land. You know, that we're now thinking of it as a valuable resource, and we're looking at it in different ways.
Yes.
So
yes,
I think that's
representing
really a celebration of that,
Yes.
and to have this piece of
That's right. Our
poetry by Les
industrial-
Murray
Yeah.
as well is
As
just
well
a
as our
real
tanks.
asset.